I grew up in a palatial castle. I was a prince, a child of the king. My first memories were the twinkling blue eyes of my father as he played with me in my nursery. I didn't know he was king. I didn't know what a king was. All I knew was the strong arms of my papa as he carried me around. I can close my eyes and remember his comforting embrace, his soothing voice, his silly jokes, and his infectious laughter. My papa was strong and kind, loving and gentle. All was right in my little world. We wrestled together, played together, giggled together. He loved me, and I was safe. He was so tender. He was so approachable. He was my friend, my father, my comfort, and my peace. I grew up with this loving man who cared for me and showered mercy, joy, love, and grace upon me. As I grew, I noticed that not all treated my dad as I did. We had servants who stood straighter and talked less when he came into the room. I could tell they adored my dad as I did, but they were very respectful of him. They used this king word, always with anticipation and delight. Like when dad would travel and be expected back, they would say, "The king is coming." Then there would be a surge of activity to make sure the castle looked perfect. I thought it funny and somewhat unnecessary. It's just my dad, and if they could only see him roll around the floor with me, they wouldn't be so guarded or circumspect around him. It all changed for me one day when I happened by the throne room. I walked past the throne room, and the curtains were slightly open. I could see in without being seen, and I could see my dad, and he didn't look pleased. As I watched, some rebels were brought in. I don't think I've ever seen my father so furious, nor the faces of his generals so solemn. I was a little bit surprised. The rebels did not repent. They cursed my father. Even I felt the insult. They threatened, mocked, and insulted the king. That made me tremble. I could only stare at my dad, for I saw things on his face I had never seen before. I didn't really understand what I was seeing. The wrath and the narrowing of his eyes, I had not seen that look before. My father the king stood up and with a quiet voice, but with fire in his eyes, said, "You have plundered my kingdom, cut down my forests, and polluted my rivers. You have mistreated my animals. You have lived by greed and cruel self-interest. Worse than that, you have ravaged the crown jewel of my creation. You have aborted and abused my children. You have dishonored and enslaved my women. You have disrespected and perverted my men. You have misled the young and abandoned the gray-haired. Worst of all, you have not represented my interest or character. You have defamed and slandered my good name. You have rejected my rule. You have twisted my truth. You have insulted and offended me, and you have done so repeatedly with deliberate and evil intent." The hall fell silent at the angry passion of the king, and then the judgment fell. "Take these rebels and hang them in the public square, and then send some of my best and bravest officers to the stronghold. Send an offer of peace on these undefiled terms. If they will lay down their arms, if they will repent of their wrongs, I will have mercy on them and bring them under the protection of my kingdom. They can eat from my table, and I will shower them with love and affection. But if they will not turn from their rebellion, they will face the full force of my wrath. This is not a discussion, a dialogue, or a negotiation. They must either repent or perish." I slipped away from the throne room and went to my chamber. My heart hammering, my head exploding. I couldn't quite understand what I was feeling. But when I thought about my father, the king, something changed in my heart. I understood my father's anger, but when the judgment fell, I was scared. I heard footsteps and turned. My dad walked in. He suddenly looked bigger and stronger. I ran to him. He embraced me, and I him. And in that intimacy, I was both son and subject. The one holding me was both my father and my king.
How's it going, Kaffa family? Good to see y'all again. Welcome back from spring break. I hope y'all's spring break trips went really well. Mine did. It was awesome. I had a blast. Even so much that I dyed my hair blue. We had an awesome time serving the local church and just deepening our friendships with one another. And thank y'all for attending today. We're going to continue on with our series, and today we're going to talk about Jesus being king. Sin is rebellion against God. We see here that these rebels had no sorrow over their actions against God and his kingdom, against this king. And ultimately, even though tender mercies and kindness and forgiveness were extended to them, they rejected it. And they did this because there was no fear of God or fear of the king inside their hearts. To fear the Lord is to depart from iniquity, to depart from sin. And if we have the fear of God in our hearts, we will do the same. We see that even though God is being rebelled against and mocked, and there are slandering him and his name and his kingdom, that ultimately he is willing to extend mercy and kindness and forgiveness to them if they would end the rebellion. We see that God, his heart is really to forgive, that he does not want any person to perish. He does not want to execute judgment on any person, but he wants mercy to triumph. And this is the heart of the king. And for that, I believe he's worthy to be feared. So really what we're asking is that you would consider the goodness and the severity of God. Because ultimately this determines who we are and who we are becoming, either rebels of God or children of God. And if you don't have the fear of God in your heart, I pray that you would pray to God and that you would ask him to reveal himself in a real way so that you can see him as he is and that you can fear him rightly. And I also believe that it's time to confess to one another in this small group of friends and of family of the things that you have been fearing instead of God, and to lay those things down so that you can be prayed for and that you can be healed from these things and begin to serve and love and fear God with your life. We love you. Have a wonderful night.